Is this the recession the US secretly needs to have? I know, that sounds insane. How could something as scary as a recession ever be something we need, right? But stick with me, because once you see what has been quietly building under the surface of this economy, the whole picture starts to look very different. If you like honest, calm conversations about money, the economy, and how all of this actually affects your real life, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit that subscribe button now so you do not miss the next breakdown when things get even more interesting out there. Alright, let us start with a simple picture. Imagine you are feeling awful for months. Headaches, fatigue, no energy. Instead of going to the doctor, you just keep taking painkillers. Every day. You feel okay for a while. But the real problem is still there, getting worse beneath the surface. That is basically what governments and central banks have been doing with the economy for years. Every time something starts to break, they cut interest rates. They pump money into the system. They bail out companies. They stimulate the economy. And just like those painkillers, it works. For a while. Stock markets bounce back. Housing prices rise. People feel richer on paper. Politicians brag about strong growth. On the surface, everything looks fine. Headlines turn optimistic. Confidence returns. But underneath, something much more dangerous is building. Massive debt, distorted prices, zombie companies that only survive because borrowing is cheap, and asset bubbles that depend on the money pump never stopping. Fast forward to today. Inflation exploded. The cost of living jumped. Groceries, rent, insurance, energy, almost everything became more expensive. Central banks slammed on the brakes and raised interest rates at the fastest pace in decades. Suddenly, the era of free and easy money is over. And now we are starting to see who was only standing because the crutches were free. Businesses that loaded up on cheap debt now have to refinance at much higher rates. Companies that survived only because money was nearly free are struggling to justify their existence. Households stretched to the limit are getting squeezed by higher mortgage payments, higher credit card interest, and shrinking savings. Risky investments that looked brilliant when money was free are now getting exposed under real financial pressure. This is where the big, uncomfortable question comes in. Does the system actually need a recession to reset? Before we answer that, we need to strip the drama out of the word recession. At its core, a recession simply means the economy shrinks for a period instead of growing. Output slows, spending cools, hiring weakens. Sometimes unemployment rises. It is painful, absolutely. But it is also a normal part of the economic cycle that has existed for as long as modern economies have. Now, think about a forest. Every so often, old trees die, branches fall, and small fires burn through dry undergrowth. It looks destructive. It smells like disaster. But it is actually healthy. It clears space. It returns nutrients to the soil. It prevents bigger, uncontrollable fires later. It allows new, stronger trees to grow. If you prevent every small fire and never let anything fall, you do not get safety. You get a giant pile of dry fuel waiting for one massive blaze that cannot be controlled. The economy works in a similar way. Economists call this process creative destruction. It is when weak, badly run, or inefficient businesses are allowed to fail, so that workers, capital, and ideas can move to stronger, more productive companies. Innovation often accelerates after downturns because resources are reallocated to better uses. Recessions, especially the more normal, cyclical ones, are often when this cleanup finally happens. Zombie companies that only exist because borrowing is cheap go under. Overpriced assets come back down to earth. Speculative bubbles pop. Investors become more disciplined. It looks ugly in the short term, but it can leave the system stronger in the long term. Now let us zoom out and look at how we got so far away from that natural cycle. After the 2008 financial crisis, interest rates were slashed and kept low for years. Quantitative easing became standard policy. Markets were supported again and again. Then 2020 hit. Pandemic, lockdowns, massive stimulus. Trillions of dollars were pushed into the system, to stop everything from collapsing. In the short run, it worked almost too well. Markets roared back. People spent stimulus checks. Asset prices skyrocketed. Housing boomed. Speculation surged. Crypto exploded. Risk seemed to disappear. But we also piled on mountains of public and private debt and created one of the biggest liquidity waves in modern history. In other words, we kept reaching for the economic painkiller bottle, and we rarely said no. Then came the side effect: inflation. Too much money chasing too few goods drove prices up across the board. Supply chains were tight. Demand was strong. Wages struggled to keep up with rising costs. Savings quietly lost purchasing power month after month. Central banks finally had to do the one thing they avoided for years: raise interest rates fast and aggressively. And this is exactly the moment where a recession often shows up. Higher rates hit the brakes on the economy. Loans get more expensive. Businesses delay expansion. Consumers cut discretionary spending. Hiring slows. Investment cools. And all the weak spots that were hidden by cheap money start to reveal themselves. So when people ask, is this the recession the US needs to have? What they are really asking is, do we need a controlled burn now to avoid a catastrophic wildfire later? There are two sides to this. On the one hand, a recession can absolutely help. It can burst dangerous bubbles before they grow into something system-breaking. It can wipe out unproductive, debt-fueled business models and free up resources for healthier, more sustainable ones. It can force governments to confront fiscal reality instead of relying endlessly on stimulus. It can bring inflation back down by cooling demand, which over time restores purchasing power for regular people. It can reset expectations. When money is cheap for too long, people begin to assume markets only go up. A downturn reminds everyone that risk exists and discipline matters. On the other hand, we cannot ignore the human cost. Recessions never hit everyone equally. People with savings, diversified assets, and stable careers usually survive the storm. People living paycheck to paycheck, with little or no cushion, feel the pain first and hardest. Layoffs, missed rent, small business closures, credit card stress — this is real life. It is not theoretical. It affects families, mental health, and long-term opportunity. So the real question is not simply, do we need a recession? It is, if a recession comes, who carries the weight? That is where policy decisions matter. Leaders can choose whether to protect the most vulnerable with smart, targeted support, or allow the adjustment to fall mostly on those least able to absorb it. They can allow inefficient businesses to fail while still preventing systemic collapse. They can aim for a slowdown rather than a crisis. From a system perspective, some form of reset after years of easy money is difficult to avoid. From a human perspective, how that reset is handled makes all the difference. History shows that economies that allow smaller corrections along the way often avoid larger collapses later. But history also shows that denial, delay, or panic can turn a manageable slowdown into something far worse. So what can you actually do? First, do not obsess over labels. Whether officials formally declare a recession matters less than what is happening in your own finances. Focus on building resilience. Reduce high-interest debt where possible. Build an emergency fund. Avoid overextending on large new loans. Invest in skills that remain valuable even during slower economic periods. Second, understand that cycles are normal. Booms and busts are not new. What changes outcomes is preparation. Third, shift from fear to strategy. Downturns can create opportunities for disciplined investors, adaptable workers, and entrepreneurs who solve real problems. Assets eventually reprice. Strong businesses survive. Innovation does not stop because growth slows. If you're thinking about this now, before panic dominates the headlines, you are already ahead of most people. Preparation is quiet. Panic is loud. Choose preparation. If this breakdown helped you see the situation more clearly and made the idea of a recession feel less like the end of the world and more like a difficult but understandable reset, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I share more conversations like this to help you navigate money, markets, and motivation with a cool head. And before you click away, take a quick look in the description. I have added links to products and resources that can help you stay informed and better prepared for whatever the economy does next. So feel free to check those out if you are interested.